Single dad gave up his first-class seat for a crying baby, and the woman's secret identity shocked him. Before we go further, please ensure to like, share, and subscribe for more interesting stories like this one. The terminal echoed with the low murmur of tired passengers and the occasional metallic clatter of rolling suitcases. Overhead announcements chimed with updates no one really listened to. 847 seating area was crowded. Business travelers glued to laptops, families trying to keep kids entertained, and solo flyers like Daniel, who sat quietly by the window, staring out at the tarmac. He held his ticket tightly. First class, a rare indulgence. He'd worked overtime, canceled plans, and clipped every unnecessary expense to afford it. It wasn't just a seat to him. It was a quiet birthday gift to himself. One moment of peace, away from the grind of single fatherhood and the ache of memories he still wasn't ready to face. The boarding call crackled through the speaker. First-class passengers were invited to line up. Daniel stood, stretching his back, when a sound cut through the noise. A baby's sharp, panicked cry. Heads turned. At the edge of the gate stood a young woman, her hair messy, her arms full, a diaper bag slipping from one shoulder, and a flushed infant wailing against her chest. She spoke with the gate agent, her voice hushed but urgent. Something was wrong. No seat, she repeated, disbelief etched across her face. But I have a ticket. The agent gave an apologetic shrug. The system had overbooked economy. There was nothing they could do. Wait for the next flight, maybe. But the woman's expression said waiting wasn't an option. She bounced the baby, her eyes glassy, scanning the impatient faces around her. People began to whisper. Some sighed loudly. A man a few seats over muttered something about planning ahead. No one moved to help. Daniel watched, heart heavy. He saw more than just a passenger in distress. He saw someone unraveling. He'd been there once. Holding his daughter on a night she wouldn't stop crying, feeling the helplessness claw at his chest while the world just watched. Without thinking, Daniel walked forward. The gate agent looked up, confused. I want to give her my seat, he said simply, holding out his boarding pass. Both women blinked at him. What? Marissa asked, stunned. No, you paid for, you need it more than I do, Daniel replied, voice calm. The baby's cries softened, as if sensing the shift. Marissa stared at him, unsure whether to accept or cry harder. Finally, she took the pass with trembling hands, her lips parting, searching for the right words. But there were none. Thank you, she whispered, tears pooling in her eyes. Daniel gave a small nod, not wanting attention. But attention found him anyway. The people who hadn't lifted a finger now watched in stunned silence as he stepped aside, moving toward the back of the line. He didn't look back. What he couldn't have known, what no one could have known, was that Marissa wasn't just a struggling mom. She was the CEO of the airline he just gave his seat up for. And this one small gesture was about to change both their lives in ways neither could have imagined. The cabin lights dimmed to a soft glow as the plane ascended, leaving the city's chaos behind. In the quiet of first class, Marissa sat still, her baby finally asleep, his small chest rising and falling against her. She barely moved, afraid to disturb the rare peace. Around her, plush seats and champagne flutes offered luxury, but her thoughts were elsewhere, down in coach, where a stranger now sat in her place. Daniel hadn't complained. When the gate agent reissued his boarding pass, he accepted it without a word. Now, wedged between two armrest-hogging strangers, he leaned toward the window, pretending the view held his attention. In truth, it was the memories, not the clouds, that filled his mind. His wife's laugh. The first night he held his daughter. The echo of loss he carried like second skin. A flight attendant passed by, placing a complimentary snack on his tray. Another followed with a bottle of water and a soft thank you. Daniel gave a tired smile, nodding politely, brushing off any recognition. In first class, Marissa reached for her phone and whispered into it. Her voice, low and strained, trembled through the short call. Yes, I'm on the flight now. No press. I needed the space. He gave me his seat. Just handed it over like it was nothing. She paused, swallowing hard. He reminded me of someone. Someone I used to be before the suits and statements and spin. Her gaze drifted across the aisle, to where other executives once sat beside her on countless business trips. But none of them would have done what Daniel did. None would have seen a struggling mother and given up comfort without question. That kind of grace wasn't taught, it was lived. No one in the cabin knew she was the woman behind the airline's brand. The CEO who, months earlier, had fumbled a public apology after a scandal left families stranded and headlines blazing. She'd chosen to travel alone, anonymously, to feel something real again. And now she had. The baby shifted, and she gently adjusted him, then looked down at the folded boarding pass still tucked into the seat pocket. Daniel's name printed in bold. She stared at it for a long moment. In the back, Daniel closed his eyes. The hum of the engine masked the quiet ache he carried, but not entirely. He thought of Emma, his daughter, and the drawing she had slipped into his bag. A picture of them flying through the clouds, hand in hand. He didn't know the woman he'd helped was anyone special. He hadn't asked. That wasn't why he did it. But his one selfless gesture, meant only to ease a stranger's burden, was now rippling outward in ways he couldn't possibly see. Somewhere in the silence between them, something unspoken passed. A quiet understanding. 2 lives, 2 stories, intersecting at 30,000 feet. And neither would ever be quite the same. The plane jolted suddenly, a shudder rippling through the fuselage. Gasps scattered across the cabin. Overhead bins rattled. Seatbelt signs blinked to life as the captain's voice urged calm. Outside, clouds swallowed the view in a blanket of gray. But the real unrest wasn't in the sky. Marissa's fingers tightened around the armrest. Her baby stirred briefly, then settled again. She hadn't moved from her seat since takeoff, but something pulled at her, a quiet insistence she couldn't ignore. She stood, adjusting the carrier over her shoulder, and stepped into the narrow aisle. Coach was dim, hushed, passengers lulled into sleep or silence. Halfway down, she found him. Daniel, slouched in a seat clearly not made for comfort, eyes closed, his head against the vibrating wall. She hesitated, then spoke softly. "Mind if I sit a minute?" He blinked, surprised but not unkind. Of course. She took the edge of the seat beside him, careful not to wake those around. For a moment, neither said anything. Then she turned slightly. "What you did? You didn't have to." He looked down at his hands. "Didn't seem right to watch you struggle. I've been there." Her brow furrowed. "My wife passed 4 years ago," he continued, voice even but distant. "Left me with our daughter. She's 7 now. Stronger than I am, some days." Marissa swallowed hard. "I'm sorry. She wanted to come with me on this trip. Drew a picture of us flying together. I told her Daddy needed a day to breathe." His smile was tight. Not bitter, just tired. "And yet, I ended up giving that day away," he added, more amused than regretful. "No," Marissa said. "You gave something far better." He looked at her then, as if seeing something just beneath the surface. She shifted, the baby murmuring lightly against her chest. "I used to believe in that kind of kindness," she said. "But somewhere along the way, I got used to the altitude. Forgot what it was like to be grounded." Daniel didn't ask what she meant. She didn't explain. Instead, they sat together in the low hum of the engine and flickering cabin lights, bound not by details, but by understanding. Eventually, she stood. "Thank you again." He nodded. "Take care of that little guy?" She smiled faintly and walked back to her seat, her steps slower, more deliberate. Back in first class, with the baby nestled against her shoulder, Marissa reached for her laptop. She opened a blank email. Her fingers hovered over the keys. Then she began to type, not a memo or a report, but something different. A decision. New policies. New programs. Real change. Not for the press, not for shareholders. For passengers like Daniel. The cabin grew quiet. Lights dimmed. The flight drifted deeper into night. And somewhere in that sky, 2 strangers carried the weight of lost years, unexpected grace, and the kind of turbulence no pilot could chart. The landing was smooth, uneventful, nothing like the undercurrent it carried. As the wheels kissed the tarmac, a collective breath was released across the cabin. Passengers unbuckled, stretched, and prepared to vanish into their own separate stories. Marissa stood quickly, cradling her son with practiced ease. She didn't glance back as she exited the plane. Her stride was swift, decisive, vanishing into the flow of travelers funneling through jet bridges and corridors. From elegance to anonymity in seconds. In the back of the aircraft, Daniel waited for his row to clear. No rush. No expectations. Just a tired man reaching the end of a journey he hadn't planned. He stepped into the terminal, his limbs stiff from cramped seating and his mind heavier than when he boarded. The crowd thinned. He found the carousel, stood in silence as bags tumbled out, and retrieved his modest suitcase, a faded tag hanging loose from its zipper. Then came the tap on his shoulder. A crew member in uniform, polite but firm. "Mr. Daniel Wells?" He turned, puzzled. "Yeah. Please come with me." No explanation. Just a steady walk down a restricted hallway, doors opening with card swipes and quiet nods. Then a final set of doors parted, and Daniel stepped into a room he couldn't have imagined. Lights. Cameras. A quiet hum of expectation. Executives in suits. Airline staff lined in polished rows. At the center of it all stood Marissa, composed, radiant, and unrecognizable from the exhausted mother who had accepted his seat hours ago. She wore her role like armor now. CEO. Commanding presence. A woman who'd retaken control, but this time, for something that mattered. Daniel froze, confused. She stepped forward, lifting the very first-class ticket he had once surrendered. In her other hand, a white envelope, sealed with gold. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, voice clear. "Today, I want to talk about quiet heroism." Murmurs moved through the crowd. Earlier on Flight 619, this man, Daniel Wells, gave up his comfort for a woman he didn't know. No cameras, no applause, just decency. When others looked away, he stepped forward. "He didn't know who I was. He didn't ask for anything. But he reminded me of what this company was built on, human dignity." The room stilled. Marissa turned to him. "You gave more than a seat. You gave space to someone who needed it, and in doing so, reminded all of us of what service truly means." She extended the envelope. "This," she said, "is a lifetime first-class pass for you and your daughter. Anywhere we fly, anytime you choose. You may never have asked for recognition, but today, you receive it." Daniel blinked. The lights, the attention, it was too much. But he accepted the envelope with steady hands, not for himself, but for the little girl waiting back home, the one who dreamed of flying beyond the clouds. As cameras flashed, he didn't smile for the press. He smiled at the thought of Emma's face when he told her where they'd go first. Paris. No, maybe Tokyo. Or somewhere the sky felt wide enough for new beginnings. The hallway light flickered as Daniel eased open the front door, careful not to wake the sleeping girl curled on the couch. Emma, his daughter, still in her school uniform, one shoe dangling off her foot, a crayon clutched in her hand. Around her, a sea of drawings, rainbows, airplanes, and a recurring image of two stick figures flying above cotton candy clouds. Always together. The house was modest. Lived in. A shelf leaned under the weight of old books and dust-covered photo frames. One image stood out, Daniel with a woman, radiant, laughing, his wife, Sarah. Her absence filled the house more than any sound ever could. Daniel stepped quietly into the kitchen. The sink was full. A lunchbox waited to be rinsed. He glanced at the clock, nearly midnight. He had just returned from job number 2, and in 5 hours, he'd be out the door for job number 3. In the silence, he sat at the table, pulled out the ticket from his wallet. First class. A one-time gift to himself. It had taken months of cutting corners, skipped meals, and extra shifts to afford it. It wasn't about luxury. It was about escape. A few hours above the world, where grief didn't reach, where responsibilities couldn't follow. But when he saw the young mother at the gate, panic on her face, the weight of a child in her arms, something inside him shifted. He'd known that kind of helplessness. The kind that hollowed you out while the world watched, unmoved. He didn't hesitate. He simply acted. Because Daniel understood the quiet heroism of small things. Holding together a life with duct tape and willpower. Whispering bedtime stories through exhaustion. Taping up birthday balloons with fingers cracked from labor. Promising more time to a daughter who only ever asked for him. Years ago, he had other dreams. He once imagined writing novels, traveling with Sarah through countries they'd read about in library books. Paris in the spring, Kyoto in the fall. She believed in his stories even when he stopped telling them. Her voice still echoed in the pages he never finished. Then came cancer. Then came the silence. He gave up many things for Emma. Comfort, rest, dreams, but never love. And that day, at gate 47, when he saw someone else drowning in chaos, he gave up the one thing he bought for himself. Because to Daniel, kindness wasn't a gesture. It was instinct. The world never applauded men like him. There were no spotlights in broken kitchens or applause in grocery lines. But men like Daniel were the reason strangers got to breathe, even for a moment. In giving up his seat, he didn't expect recognition. He simply saw a need and answered it. And perhaps that's why his story resonated, not because of what he gave up, but because of how quietly, how wholly he gave. Not for attention, but because he remembered what it felt like when no one did. The terminal hummed with quiet activity, but Daniel barely noticed the noise. His attention was on the small hand tugging at his own, Emma, bouncing in brand-new sneakers, her backpack slung over one shoulder, eyes wide with wonder. "Is this really happening?" she whispered. Daniel smiled, a warmth settling in his chest. "It is." At the gate, a familiar figure stood waiting. No media swarm, no cameras, just Marissa, dressed casually, her hair pulled back, her smile genuine. The CEO mask was gone. What remained was the woman Daniel had met at 30,000 feet. Only now, she knew who she was again. Emma spotted her first. She let go of her dad's hand and ran forward, throwing her arms around Marissa's waist. "You're the lady from Daddy's story," she said, her voice filled with awe. Marissa crouched, hugging her back. "And you must be Emma. I've been waiting to meet you." The moment lingered, a quiet thread tying past to present, struggle to grace. No grand announcements. Just the unspoken acknowledgement that something had shifted in all of them. As they boarded the aircraft, Daniel was the last to step through the door. The first-class cabin welcomed him with soft lighting and the scent of fresh linen. This time, he wasn't out of place. Emma pressed her face to the window, already enchanted by the view of jet bridges and blinking runway lights. Her excitement was contagious. Daniel settled into the leather seat and reached into his carry-on. From it, he pulled a worn leather journal, untouched for years. He ran his fingers across the cover, hesitated, then flipped to a blank page. And he began to write. Not about sorrow, not about what he'd lost, but what had been found. A moment of humanity in an airport. A kindness that refused to go unnoticed. A journey that had started with a seat and led to something far greater. Across the aisle, Marissa sat in quiet reflection. The storm around her position had long since passed, but she'd come out of it changed. The airline, under her lead, had implemented new family-first boarding protocols, emergency flexibility for parents, and staff training rooted in empathy. Not for headlines. For people. This trip wasn't official. It wasn't a gesture. It was a thank you. Outside, the sky burned soft gold as the plane taxied into position. Engines roared to life. Emma squealed as the plane accelerated, gripping her father's hand. As they lifted into the clouds, Daniel looked out at the horizon. Not with longing, but with peace. For years, he had moved through life carrying only what he must. Now, with his daughter beside him and his pen dancing across fresh pages, he felt the weight of survival lift. This wasn't a return to normal. It was the beginning of something entirely new. A man who once gave everything to keep his world from falling apart was finally soaring. And the woman he helped, once buried beneath titles and pressure, had found her way back to herself. All because one act of kindness found its wings. If you enjoyed this story, ensure to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing, heartfelt stories like this. Also, let us know where you are watching from, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Mention the names of the characters, Daniel, Emma, and Marissa. What part of their journey moved you the most? Would you have done what Daniel did? We'd love to hear your perspective. Every share helps inspire someone else to choose kindness in unexpected places. Your support keeps these stories alive, so don't forget to turn on notifications and stay tuned for more powerful, true-to-life narratives every week.